Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about understanding that range of motion itself is a massive part of increasing tension on the muscle. Again, you'll hear people talk about mechanical tension, they'll talk about increasing tension, these guys will talk about time under tension, right? These are all topics that get brought up a lot. But here's the thing that you have to understand. Range of motion matters here, and the reason for that, when people talk about tension on a muscle, oftentimes they only think in terms of weight. But one of the biggest things you'll notice, you can always lock out a lot more weight than you can get into stretch positions, right? In other words, you can take a board press, pin presses, whatever, do half reps on your bench, squat, any of those things, and you can move more weight. So without even getting into the biomechanics, that should be the first thing that people say, well, wait a minute, this overload training, I'm increasing tension. Well, no, you're not increasing tension on the muscle. You're actually not, because you're at the points with the moment arms and the angles the muscles and joints are put at to where it's a lot easier to move it because there is less tension being put on the muscle. It's usually the more lengthened positions, like if you look at the benching I'm doing there, the bottom of the bench, right, when you touch the chest. The stretch position in a tricep extension, when it's over behind your head or with a skull crusher at your face. The bottom of a squat. Again, when we put these muscles into the deeper stretch positions, that is usually where biomechanically the most tension is placed on a muscle. So if your goal is to increase tension, it's not always about, well, should we be stricter? Should we do this? It's like, those are things that you could look at. But with any given weight on the bar, on the dumbbell, on the machine, the most tension is placed on the muscle when it's usually, again, unless there's some sort of active insufficiency going on, right? And that can happen with some movements. And when it's at the bottom, okay, those rows that stretch at the bottom with your scapula spread, that's the most tension placed on the lats. So if we're trying to increase tension on the muscle itself, range of motion, particularly on that end of the range of motion, is kind of a big deal. So the same thing when people start talking about, well, time under tension. Well, oftentimes they're doing stuff that spends more time in the easier parts of the exercise where there's less tension. So are they necessarily increasing tension? Not always. And if anything, what people have found is that if partials are used, and this isn't every time, but in most cases, if the partials are only done at the hardest part of the movement, which would technically be, no resetting at the top, that's usually the partials that tend to give really good hypertrophy. They give good muscle growth in the studies. And I'm not saying that these positions are the only thing that matters. Obviously, the top end of a movement does matter. It absolutely does matter. It's just less important by comparison, meaning it does a lot less. Right? It does a lot less just because the tensions are different on the muscle. But can it contribute to overall tension to certain muscle fibers? Yes. And that's then the other end of the coin. Because when we start talking about tension on fibers, what happens? That means as different muscle fibers get tired, they get fatigued in a muscle, other ones have to start taking over. Okay? See where we're going with this? So a lot of muscle fibers are getting more tension placed upon them on the 10th rep than they were on the 5th or the 6th. In a weight that's challenging for 10 reps. Now, it'll be less true, obviously, if you could do 15 reps with a weight with good form and you stop at 10, obviously that's going to be dramatically different than if it's like your 10 to 12 rep max. Okay? But that's the point. And then it's the same thing when we start looking at, lockouts and other ends of the range of motion. They still matter for muscle growth, mainly because we're fatiguing a lot of stuff in the bottom, and there can sometimes be additional muscle fibers that are really only being recruited when you get to those more extreme ends, or they're the only things that are left when the others are fatigued. So the case can be made for the most possible complete muscular growth and development, you probably should be doing the tops also. But again, I want to be very clear here that the bulk of the evidence and even the biomechanics would suggest that the bottom part is where most of the growth occurs. And actually, people could skip lockouts and still make phenomenal gains. Phenomenal gains, even drug-free lifters, by getting into those stretch positions. But we do need to address the fact that, yeah, for complete development, getting that last little bit, you should probably be doing the lockout too, if that is your goal. And this is, again, one of the reasons why we should use a couple different exercises, right? That's why a couple different movements can really help overall development. And they can still be fairly similar movements. They don't have to be dramatically different, right? They don't have to be dramatically different. But it's a good idea to do a couple different exercises, okay? Again, just to get more complete development, because there are different parts of a muscle that work that way. And it can be the same with different parts of the range of motion. So again, I do want to stress that skipping the bottom part of any movement, the stretch position, is probably the worst thing you could do for overall muscle growth and mobility, because we have to have that talk of mobility, something I've been talking about more and more. Why does that matter? Because mobility is our strength at the terminal ends of the range of motion. Okay, when we are in deeper stretch positions. And if we have mobility, we have better flexibility, we have better stabilization of joints, but we also can gain more muscle. Why? Because we're stronger in those positions to where we can recruit the most muscle fibers. There's the most tension placed upon the muscle. So again, how do we build mobility though on lifting? Well, stretching, weighted stretches, dynamic stuff. Yeah, that all matters. But what matters a whole lot is taking your exercises, to a full range of motion, right? Taking them through a full range of motion and not getting shorter and shorter as you start to lose mobility. Okay? So what am I saying? Your curls should go all the way down, right? Your elbows should lock out, like you see me doing curls there. Your squats, you should squat as deep as you can. Again, not necessarily if your goal is to lift the most weight in a partial exercise in a competition, but if your goal is to gain as much muscle, as much mobility, as much strength, overall strength, it would be a very good idea. Because even that terminal range of motion will carry over if you're forced to then do, a more partial movement and say a powerlifting meet. That muscle and strength you gain at the bottom still carries over very effectively. So overall, it's a good idea to train this way. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.